So today is Yudalit Tammuz, but the previous 2 days was Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz, and Chabad they don't say Tafnun because it's what's known as the Yom HaGiula, the day of redemption of the previous Rebbe of Yosef Yitzchak. On those days in 1927, he was freed from his prison sentence, his hard labor sentence, etc. Now, what happened was, on the 15th of Sivan, 1927, in the middle of the night, the KGB, the GPU was called at the time, and Kevedat, excuse me, they came unannounced to his apartment. He lived at the time in Leningrad, which is today Petersburg. And they searched high and low for papers, and the story is told that both his secretary Rabbi Chaim Lieberman and the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe's wife, the previous Rebbe's second daughter, swallowed papers. That's what we're told. Anyway, regardless, they arrested him, and his sentence was death, a death sentence. On Gimel Tammuz, his life was spared, and they transferred the punishment from death to hard labor in a city called Kostroma. And Kostroma was no fun to be there, but his life was spared. So as far as the Hasidim were concerned, that itself was a miracle and very much celebrated. We'll maybe talk about that a little more soon. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, all this time, he wrote his memoirs. He wrote down himself all the details that he had experienced in jail. He was steadfast. He didn't bend to them. For example, when they interrogated him, they wanted him to speak in Russian. He said, no, I'm only speaking in my mother tongue, Yiddish, because he knew that the interrogators, some of which were Jews and knew Yiddish, and he said, too bad. So they pointed a gun at him, and they said they would kill him. He says, that little toy can only scare someone who believes in multiple gods and one world. A Yid who believes in one God and two worlds, this little toy won't scare me. And so his defiance, mamish defiance, was amazing, was beyond amazing. And ultimately, on the 12th of Tammuz, 1927, he was told that he could leave Kostroma. His sentence has been abolished. The problem was, like a good old mother Russia, the day that he got the news, the office in which you went to get the paper to be released was closed. So he couldn't leave on the 12th. So it stayed over another day, the 13th. So that's why in Chabad we celebrate not only the 12th of Tammuz, but also the 13th, because in actuality, even though he got the psak, the ruling to leave on the 12th, he didn't go out till the 13th. So we benefit 2 days that we don't say Tachnun, as the saying goes. But in all seriousness, the previous Rebbe was a Yid who, I would think more than any of the other Rabbeim, had the most trials and tribulations as far as physical, material, life-threatening issues. He was jailed numerous times. This one was the biggest one. And he was beaten. There is a memento. There is a document that I have access to where a family member writes about what he remembers as a young child being taken by his mother and grandmother to the cell of the previous Rebbe. And he remembers you only can look through a little cutting out, a little window or so, that he was able to see his grandfather. and he didn't know. He was so, he was 4 years old or so, 5 years old, very young. And he asked his grandmother and like, mother, like, what's going on? Why is my Zayda there? So this is eyewitness to what he wrote, what the previous Rebbe wrote about his experiences. There were eyewitnesses that also wrote down what they saw, what he saw. So it was, they treated him horribly. They say that they threw him down, the steps, they pushed him down. Those steps was iron steps. I when I was in Moscow in 2017, and I went into a building to have dinner by my nephew, it was still a building probably from those years, and I saw on the stairwell, like iron, real iron, cast iron. I'm just saying, so it made that issue that they said that they threw down the Rebbe on iron steps. It made it more real for me. Bekitzer, the Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok ben Reb Shalom Ber, the previous Rebbe, was a Baal Mesiras Nefesh bepoel mamish, just like Rabbi Shapiro said yesterday in his very important hesped of the Kaddish Moshe Shmuel ben Dovid, which I'm dedicating this our talk Fabrengen to the Kaddish. He said it, I mentioned it to Issa just before. He said, I thought that was a wonderful thing that he said. I mean, wonderful, it was right. He said, Avram brought Yitzchak to the Akedah. But the Poel Mamish, he didn't shecht him, Moshe, right? You heard that, right? He didn't shecht him. So, and it's considered Mesiras Nefesh. Rabbi Shapiro said, how much more so, here is Moshe Shmuel, who's a Kaddish. They did shecht him. He was shechted. So the level of Mesiras Nefesh isn't just in thought, but machshava, or even I'm bringing you to the haram. I'm bringing you to the place to vayikach some acheles, and I'm taking a knife and about to stop. Vayikach malach, stop! Don't go like that. So it didn't happen, and here it happened. The Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, it happened. It happened to him. Min Hashamayim, but he was on the death squad of. He tells over. I don't know if you ever read it. It's in Kuti Deburim. It's in English today. You should read it at some point. How he heard from his cell the screaming, the basically when they killed, they shot you. This was very, very real. This wasn't some imagination and fantasy. This was just a matter of time. And mamish b'derech nes, he was saved. Yes, there was intervention of the State Department and this and that and all kinds of people. Another interesting thing that I came across just yesterday or 2 days ago was Yitzchak Isaac Cook, Rabbi Cook. Celebrated and wrote a letter. It was online of the Rebbe's saved. Now, people don't know. Most people don't know, but the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came to America, when he came to Eretz Yisrael in 1929, he went to visit Rabbi Cook. And I was in the room. It's off Rehov Yafa in Yerushalayim, where Rav Cook and the Frierdiker Rebbe sat and spoke. And you can go there today. It's open. And he wasn't the only one that went to meet Rav Cook. Others, Gedolim, Tzadikim, just saying that Rav Cook, and besides Rav Cook from his mother's side, comes from the Tzemach Tzedek's Chassidim. So Rav Cook, on one half of his ancestry, is Lubavitch, is Chabad. So he wrote that beautiful letter. Then Reb Chaim Oizer, the famous Reb Chaim Oizer Grodensky, the Litvische Godel, the Rav of Vilna, and the famous Reb Chaim Oizer. So he also wrote a letter and to support and to help. But more importantly, when they came to complain that the Lubavitchers are making another Yom Tov, here we go. They have a new Yom Tov, the Hasidim. So Reb Chaim Oizer said, and you have to understand the background of what was going on in Russia at the time with Haskalah, and kids were leaving, and it was rampant, So Reb Chaim Oizer said, by uns wird weniger und weniger. By us, the Litvische and others, it's less and less each day. And by the Hasidim, kommen zu. Every time there's more and more. So what are you complaining about a Hasidic holiday? Halavai, we would have, these words I'm paraphrasing, he didn't say them. Halavai, we would have more holidays, to celebrate Yiddishkeit. So what I'm pointing out to you, Chevra, is that the previous Rebbes, the whole story of his death, his incarceration, and his freedom made an impact on Russian Jewry, and in Jewry b'chlal, all over the world, but mostly Russian Jewry, and it really highlighted for many of these Gedolim and their people what Hasidus is, and what Lubavitch, especially the previous Rebbe, is, that they don't give up and they do or die for Yiddishkeit. And another thing that it's important to know, don't think that most got away. Most were killed. Just yesterday I received on my WhatsApp a letter from a chassid. His name was Rabbi Yankel Maskalik. And he was best friend with Rabbi Yoel Khan's father, Rabbi Fol Khan. He was known as Folye Khan. The letter was written in 1932. Fol Khan was taken away to Siberia to hard labor in 1930. Rabbi Yoel Khan was born in January of 1930, and in March or April or May, one of those months, the father wasn't taken away again. Who knows if they'll ever see him again? He was away for 3.5 years. That means he had a son, he had daughters. He had 4 daughters before, and he had a son. Rabbi Yoel was his baby, okay? And he only saw him the first 3-4 months of his life, several months, and then he was gone. So this chassid of Yankel Maskalik was like a best friend with Folye Khan, like real soul brothers. So Yankel Maskalik, who also was, had to watch himself, he made it his business to be like a surrogate father to the Khan children and to Rabbi Yoel's mother, Rivka Khan. And I know this because one of his grandsons, who I spoke to, tells over the story from the family that Pesach night, either 1932 or 33, one of those, he came home very late to his own Seder. So the family asked him, "Where were you? We're waiting. We were worried." He says, "I was by Folye's family, by Folye Khan's family. I helped make the Seder for them because their father is in jail, is away." Now, the letter I read yesterday was about Purim. He did the same thing Purim. So, you understand? He puts his own family aside because of the love for the other family, little children, and they should have a Seder led by a man, and so to Purim. So what I'm saying is, and this fellow, Rabbi Yankel, in 1938, he and some other Lubavitch Chassidim were taken away, shot to death. We do have their records now. They were shot by the KGB. Yeah. So in 1932, in those years, he succeeded to get away, but they caught up to him. So our ancestors, Lubavitch Chassidim in Russia, paid their dues big time. The ringleader, if you could call that Chas v'Sholom, was the previous Rebbe. And that's why the previous Rebbe called for who is ready to give their life for Yiddishkeit. And there were 10 Chassidim who signed up and vowed and made what's called a krisis bris, a covenant, with the Rebbe that do or die for Yiddishkeit. And we know some of those people. They survived. So this was, in addition to this, his health wasn't the best, even outside of the incarceration and the torture and punishment. They had the family some kind of, Parkinson's or MS, or there was some issue that he already started to display in his, I can't tell you if it was childhood or teenhood, adulthood, but his health wasn't the best, and it came out in the 1930s, where sometimes his speech was slurred. Excuse me, and so that was his own illness, which led to, in the 1940s, the stroke and other conditions, and he was wheelchair bound, but he did survive. So he survives Stalin. He goes to Poland and Warsaw. He survives Hitler, Yamach Shema. He comes to America and he survives his brothers, the Misnagdim, who wanted to destroy him, okay, to put it mildly. And he survives his health till he passes on in 1950. So looking at his life from the outside, it was a very difficult life, health-wise, and also, I don't know if you could say politically, but it wasn't easy. I'll give you another example. And we spoke about this over the years. In Poland, in Warsaw, he was antagonized by the other Hasidic groups. Why? Because in Warsaw, the big Hasidus was Ger, and Alexander, Razmin, Amshinov. Here comes the Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Lubavitcher Rebbe, which they know is very different in the style of Hasidus and everything else. And all of a sudden, Ger Hasidim are running to hear his mimer at Shalashudas time. It's like, hey, you got your own Rebbe, this is our hub. Lahavdil, Moshe, United, I think, is in Denver or Chicago, whatever, right? And all of a sudden, or Delta, whatever, another big company will come in. American, I think, is out in Texas, in Dallas, right? American will park itself in Chicago or in Denver and say, we are the big boys here, get out of here. And, you stay in Texas. It's a foolish example, but it's like, what are you coming in here? You're Russians, we're Polish. Russians and the Russian mentality and the Polish mentality is night and day, okay? So both culturally we're very different. The Hasidus is very different. You're into Chabad, using Chochmah Bina Das. We're into the Midos, the emotionalism. One second, Moshe. So it's like, okay. What? Moshe, good to see you smile. Yes. You need a lot of smiles, Moshe.
Yeah?
Moshe, I want those balloons.
I still haven't figured that one out. Two questions, Rabbi Dalfin, just about this topic.
Yeah.
In terms of the timeline, so we know that the Rebbe's wedding was in 1928.
Yes.
In Kislev.
Yes.
So
in Warsaw.
In Warsaw. This is the point I'm asking. When the Rebbe when he was released in 1927, but he was basically then kicked out of Russia by the Russian government. But I thought that he went to Latvia.
Yeah, he went to Riga. That's where he went. Riga, Latvia.
So why was the chasna? My first question is, why was the chasna in Warsaw as opposed to Latvia? Because then later he went to Warsaw. So I'm just curious why the chasna was in Warsaw in terms of the location. And I just want to add on the side of what you're talking about right now about maybe how other Hasidic Rebbeim, how the Rebbe's treated him. I asked actually one of Rav Shapira's sons not so long ago, last 2-3 years, it was during COVID. Somehow it came up, the discussion about the Rebbe riots being in Warsaw, and I asked if the Eish Kodesh, Shapira, if he went to the Chasana. So they said to me that they basically kind of said like he had a certain relationship with the riots or respect, but they said he did not go to the chasna. That's what I seem to remember them telling me. Anyway, I don't know. I got the impression though from the way they were saying it to me that there was some sort of like, not. Like you're saying, that maybe some of the other Rebbeim didn't treat the rayats, maybe.
Right. I thought that he did go, but I'll have to verify that. I'll see if I could verify that. But regardless, there was a strained relationship between, definitely the Gerer Rebbe, but you should know that the Rav of Warsaw, Menachem Zemba of Praga, was section, and he came, of course.
Yeah.
And the Razminer came. There's two separate things.
Maybe.
There's two separate things. A Rebbe's marrying off a daughter. It wasn't like, it wasn't animosity, what do you have to, show, what do you have to do your thing here? But let me go back to let me go back to the first question, and that is, the reason he made the Pashtus, the wedding in Warsaw, is because that's where Yidentum was, that was where it was flourishing, that's where the Rabbanim were, the Rebbes. Riga was a Yekis. and the Rebbe had a group of Hasidim here, but a small group, he didn't have the masses. Now, I'm sure they would come to a wedding, but he wanted to make a wedding that's really respectful, where, Rebbe's leadership would come, and that was in Warsaw. He would do it, I'm sure, if he was still in Russia and things were open, he would do it there, but things that were closing down, he was chased out, as he said, so his alternative to accomplish a nice wedding was in Warsaw, and at the time he had enough people both in Warsaw and other places to make it happen. Because the question is another question: why by his first daughter Moshe? I'm sorry, by the Rashag married in 1921, and that was in Rostov. So it was before 22, before Stalin started, but it was a very simple wedding. So some ask, why didn't he make it in Warsaw then? I would say the answer is because things were still peaceful, and this is where he lived, and this is where Rabbi Chaim Oizer was, and Rabbi Baruch Ber, whatever, so there wasn't that need to do that.
But that's 1921, Rebbe. 1921 was just a year or so after the Rebbe Rashab
passed away. So
and that's where Chabad was. The Rebbe Ratz was in Russia.
Right. And there's another thing. In 1921, the previous Rebbe was deathly sick with typhus. Deathly. And he was almost close to dying. So again, I don't know how long that lasted. You have to know the timing. But for sure, part of 1921, he was very, very ill. So it could be that, the doctors told him he can't travel. But again, from all sides, it wasn't a burning issue and there was no money. And they were poor beyond words, you know what I'm saying? Isser, what do you want to say?
I want to ask, because we're talking about Poland now, in the beginning of the century, what was the relationship, if any, with the Aguda?
For that, you have to read my book, Aguda and Chabad. It's a whole treatise.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, Bekitzer, but I have to get you the book somehow. But it's the Rashab backed out of the Aguda as well as the Reb Chaim Brisker. So right in 1912.
What was the ostensible reason?
They felt the Aguda was not true to what they promised, which was to stay steadfast and not give into the Yekish view of orthodoxy and acceptance of Russian studies and things like that. The Rashab and Rabbi Chaim joined hands, and they were what you would call fanatic, what people would like fanatical, and no compromises. So the Rabbi Chaim wrote 18 conditions for him joining the Aguda, 18. And when the Rashab was found out about it, he said, "That's good enough for me," So he signed up initially, and then Reb Chaim, and then he backed out. And when he backed out, the Rashab backed out too. But there's many details in this, but that's the gist of it. And of course, that caused the schism between Ger and the previous Rebbe, because Ger was Aguda, the Imre Yemes was the Aguda in Poland, you understand? So, and the previous Rebbe, had a tremendous pen, and he could also lay it into you in writing, and he did. And he wrote few sharp letters, which today is online, and I included some into my book. He basically felt that he's selling out, and he told him so. And the Imre Yemes, had his position, and that caused so in our common language, by us peasants, we would say there was some bad blood there, but it never got to a point where, I think, after 1923, 24, 25, as time went on, it kind of dissipated or calmed down. But then between the Rebbe and the Ger, but then when it comes to Poland in 1933, it kind of it brews it up again. It's like, oh, you're now in my territory, so there was these sensitive issues, so it could be that was a spillover to the Eish Kodesh. I don't know, because I'll tell you something. The Eish Kodesh in his writing, you must have heard it from Shapiro, and I learned it yourself. He builds on Tanya. He has a lot of stuff from Tanya in his, in his approach, and I don't know. I don't. It's definitely not the Chabad approach. It's more of a straightforward, user-friendly manual. There's no question, But I don't think that would be a kind of a reason to not come to a wedding. It's hard to imagine. There was another.
That's what he said to me.
What?
Yeah, that's what his son said to me. I would love to see if you.
Okay. I'll ask around. There was another Hasidic Rebbe, which I understand today, when you couldn't go back to Eretz Yisrael a few weeks ago because of the Iran situation. Next door was the grandson, a great grandson from my Rebbe, called the Porisov. Porisov was some place in Poland. And we have a Chabad family named Blazinski, whose great grandparents, whose parents, great parents, whatever, were Porisov of Hasidim. This Blazinski, Reb Meir Blazinski, who by the way made Baal Tshuvas, he was very, very bright. He began, but in 1921 he started to learn Tanya in a shtibel with a few Chevra, and they were kicked out. And because the Porisov Rebbe was very upset, because he said children 12, 13 should not be learning Hasidus. So this was a kind of common thinking, Moshe, amongst the Polish Rebbes, that Chabad Hasidus, you need to be mature to start learning it. And they were against it. Even though the Porisov Rebbe came to see the Rayats. And there's a story about that. So these things have to be looked at, each in the, it's so easy to put them into one bag and say, because of this or that. It doesn't work that way. It has to be looked at. So the issue of the Polish Rebbes, but the Klal, not wanting the youth to learn Hasidus because they felt they weren't mature, that my understanding is is the case. So whether the Eish Kodesh felt the same way, could be. I don't know. Could be. We have to really, show proof. Just to say, well, he was in Poland, Bemela, and he was a chassid of the Ratzminer, whoever he was. I don't know who was he a chassid of any certain Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh from before. Whatever.
I say that I'm not 100%.
Not 100% sure. Whatever. So this has to be looked at. But overall, what I just said is a general picture. But let's go back to the important part, that the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, so he's saved and he comes to America, and he told you his health was compromised, but nevertheless, he gathered a very good staff. Besides the Rebbe and his son-in-law, the Rashag, the older son-in-law from Ayo Garari, he had Rabbi Nissim Mendel, Rabbi Chadakov, and other secretaries, and young Chevra. See, the Rabbi Jacobson, Yisrael Jacobson, sent a group of boys from America. Menashe, could you guys mute yourself, please? Sent a group of boys from America to.
It was just killed. A young boy was just killed in Gushei Zion.
Okay. Can we keep focus right now, please? Okay, so the Rebbe, there was a group of boys that the Rabbi Jacobson sent to learn in Otfotsk, which was south of Warsaw, where the previous Rebbe had the Lubavitch Yeshiva. And the previous Rebbe asked Rabbi Jacobson if with these boys, when they went back to America because of the war, if they could start a yeshiva. And they were the troops. So in Chicago, you had Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Hecht from Chicago. In Brooklyn, you had Rabbi J.J. Hecht and Rabbi Avram Hecht and Rabbi Mordechai Oltein, and these, Rabbi Greenberg, who was in Patterson, they were the soldiers of the Frierdiker Rebbe who went out and set up those 14 yeshivas in the United States. So what I'm saying is that even though his health was compromised, he had young people who were already his chassidim. And the one who's credited to this is Rabbi Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson they were Torah V'das Talmidim, because Torah V'das was the main yeshiva that in the 1930s, and they started to learn Chassidus, some of them, and they became very, very close to Rabbi Jacobson, and they went out to do the previous Rebbe's works, and from there the Rebbe took over and sent shluchim and all of that. So when we celebrate Yud Beis Tammuz, and you ask yourself, like, it's 70, 80 years later, almost 100 years actually, right? 1927, it's not 2025, 98 years later. And I was thinking this Yud Beis Tammuz, like, the longer it gets from the Yud Beis Tammuz in 1927, it's like becoming more and more forgotten. Because Lubavitch, Chabad is very progressive. And every week and every month and every year there's a new holiday and a new this and a new that. 1 second. So, especially with Hey Teves and the Danotzach and Yudalat Kislev, the Rebbe's anniversary. So, in a sense, the Rebbe and his life took over the focus of anything from before. And I understand it, and there's some good things about it, but at the same time, the Rebbe was the one who celebrated all the previous Rabbeim's special days. But I do see, and I discussed this with my Chaverim, some of them which are in yeshivas, Mashpiyim, Rosh Yeshiva, that they say that it's like big deal, like, Yud Beis Tammuz. Okay, it happened 98 years ago, but the truth is, if you're a student of history, for sure, without that we wouldn't be here. Lubavitch wouldn't be here. Chabad wouldn't be here. So what do you mean? It's a foundation. Moshe, you wanted to say something?
Just real fast. I want you to know, Rabbi Dalfin, that yesterday I saw a number of different Chabad Chassidim, particularly at the Levaya, different ones that I know, and most of them were wearing a kapata.
Right.
And it was not. I was going to say, Dafka at the Levaya that we were at, it was not forgotten.
Right.
Dafka, the last speaker, Rabbi Dahan.
I heard it.
Was he spoke about it. He made a specific point about it. I don't know if this was on the video, the live stream, but the crowd stayed after the Levaya formally finished and sang Nigunim. Nigun, Chabad Nigunim, one after the other. I've never seen anything before like that at a Levaya like that. It was extremely powerful, in my opinion.
It wasn't on the live stream, but later in the afternoon they had a clip of them singing the Balatanya, the Dalad Bavas, and it was very, very powerful. Very powerful. So I understood probably that they sang more Nigunim.
Meant more.
Yeah, so I imagine there was I saw the Lubavitcher Bacharim, right? There was a group.
Yeah, because the different from different yeshivas that were connected to the family. The younger brother Zalmi, who is now he learned in Yeshiva Gedola in Daled, the Chabad Yeshiva Gedola that's in Daled, Ramat Bet Shemesh Daled. He had learned before that. He learned in Yeshiva Katana in the Krayot in near Haifa, in the Haifa and Yeshiva that's there. So I think Bachram came from there. I think I was told the army sent a bus to bring Bachram from Haifa. To Levaya.
So I want to conclude, Moshe, by asking you to say a few words about, your thoughts. If you want to share with us, no pressure. If you're uncomfortable, don't.
I appreciate it. Just because of the time, I'll be extremely brief. Just I was telling Rabbi Dalfin briefly yesterday that I because of our closest with the family, the Noll family, Rabbi Shapira called me Tuesday morning, 8:00 in the morning, to tell me the news. And I knew that there had been a very bad attack going to sleep Monday night. I saw the news, but I figured, my wife and I both figured we would find out the details in the morning. He called me 8:00 in the morning, and bottom line is that when he called me, he said he wants to go to the house. He just found out. He's asking me, where am I? So I was actually at that moment, I was with my wife in the car. We were on the way to a medical appointment in Yerushalayim for my wife that I wanted to take her to. And we were on the back road leaving Beit Shemesh. We hadn't even gotten out of Beit Shemesh yet. So we pulled over to the side of the road, and when we found out what happened, my wife started saying to me, maybe you should go back. I started to explain to Shapira, I'm taking my wife to the doctor. But then she said, and then my son called, my son Gavriel, who's in the army. He called with the news to tell us, and he said, but you should go back. You should go back. So then we said, okay, fine. And then, so she literally threw me out of the car on the side of the road, and she left for Yerushalayim. So I called my co-gabbai, Mendy Newman, who actually called me right then to make sure I knew. So I told him to come pick me up. So he did. And we went right to the house. And when we got there, Shapiro was there, and the army was there, of course. They had already been there from 3:00 in the morning when they knocked on the door to tell the family. And Dovid, he said the dog was barking, and he said, so he was the one that went down to answer the door. So as soon as he opened the door, he saw the soldiers there from the army. He knew exactly why they were there. He said to them, I know why you're here. You don't have to explain. Bottom line is, to cut to because of the time, bottom line was that when we got to the house, though, Dovid wasn't there. Dovid was in dialysis on Kibbutz Sora, which is a kibbutz outside of Beit Shemesh. He was on dialysis from 6:00 in the morning already till he was supposed to be there till 10 in the morning. So he had to go from after hearing this news to go to sit in dialysis. So my friend, Mendy and I decided with the coordination of the family and the army, we would go and be with him and then pick him up and bring him back, which is what we did. So the bottom line is, I spent the next 2-3 hours with the family, and the army was amazing. How they discussed things with the family and took care of them in each step to make decisions about certain things, the Levaya, the Shiva, different issues. So the bottom line was that at one point, and here's the issue I want to get to, the family said that they'd like to have private time with the Nifter, with their son, with Moshe, before the Levaya starts, the formal Levaya. An army Levaya is very formal, there's a full formal procession and so forth. So they said, well, there's two options if you want to do that. You can either do it there at Har Herzl in Jerusalem, which that was a decision where to have the Levaya to begin with, either there or actually a new section that they're building in Beit Shemesh, but this is Har Herzl. And they said you could do it, but if you do it there, it's like you basically are in a tent, and it's not a huge amount of privacy, it's not so comfortable and so forth and so on for a host of different reasons. Or they said you could go to the base called Shura, which I'm sure some people have heard of. Shura has been in the news since October 7th. It's the main base of the Rabbanut for dealing with identification and of the soldiers who've been murdered, fallen action, and preparing them. They work with the Chevra Kadisha, prepare them for burial and so forth. So if you go to Shura, there's a very which is where he was anyway at that time, where they bring them anyway. They said they have a very, very mechubad, comfortable, proper, whole space dedicated for the family to come and to be with their with their loved one. So the family opted to go to Shur, and this Rav Dahan from the community is also a senior Rav in the Rabbanut, and he knows all about this. And since October 7th, he's spent hundreds of days at Shura helping with the identification and all the work that has to be done and so forth. He said for sure go to Shura. So at that moment, I'm looking at Rav Dovid, our friend here, I realized, that he's going to need some support. Maybe, probably. The family's going to need some support also with Hebrew and so forth. So I offered to go with them in the van, leaving the house. That's why there was such a big gap from when they left the house to when the Levaya started, because the family wanted to go from the house to Shura, which is about an hour's drive, to be there for at least an hour or so, and then to go from there to Yerushalayim, to Herzl. So I went with the family. They wanted me to come with. Rav Dahan also came with at the last minute. He came on the bus as well. So what I wanted to share, I'm sorry for the long introduction, is that I've never been to Shura, I've heard a lot about it. When we pulled up and we got out of the van, out of the bus, you go in, and they built a very, very special, outdoor space of indoor rooms along a big hallway that's open to the sky, that's open, that are rooms, very nicely built rooms to receive the family, that the family can go and have privacy. There's 3, 4, 5 of these rooms. And then there's a big room where they put the niftar, and the family can go and have privacy with the niftar. And in each of these rooms, they have drinks for the family, cold, hot, comfortable place to sit, very nicely done. And after being there, very quickly, I felt this feeling of that I've never felt before ever in my life, of that I'm in a very holy place. I've been to Hebron countless times, the Kotel, different place, Kever Rachel.
770.
770. The Ohel, of course, obviously, I'm just saying that this place, you felt that it was the entrance to Gan Eden, and I felt this feeling very acutely that I was in a place of ultimate truth, that you had to be extremely careful what you were thinking about at that time, and you had to feel, and you felt it was like black, there was no gray there. there was no gray, and you just felt it like it hit you like that. And I've never felt that before to that extent. And I was so humbled by the soldiers that were there, all religious, Hasidim, Dati Leumi, doesn't matter, but you could see each one, the care that they gave the family. I've never seen anything before like it in my life. And the care they give to them, and then the whole procedure, and there's more to share, but because of time, I want to write this up. I want to write this up over the next few days, and I want to try to maybe send it out, because it was very powerful. I got a mini tour of the whole facility, meaning where the Rabbanut does all their work. And with this, I'll leave. Rav Dahan told me yesterday at the house when we got back from the Levaya, while the family was starting to have their first Suda, the Suda Havara, that he told me, he said that when this whole facility was built, also the whole massive facility to take care of the soldiers when they come in, he said it was built and finished maybe 3 months before Simchas Torah of 2023. And he said at the time, people said, why are you building such a big facility? Like, why? We're never going to use it. It's huge. Why are you going to rooms and rooms and rooms for the Chevra Kadisha to work, etc.? Massive garage for the vans for the Chevra Kadisha, the army. And they said, well, this is the budget that we had, and we were able to use it, so we use it. And he told me, another soldier told me there, and of course this was in the news, that on October 7th, Simchas Torah, the place was filled to way beyond capacity, unfortunately. And so I just want to share that it was a very humbling experience. It was a very spiritual experience. It was an experience of extreme kedusha, and and to be there with the family. Lo Aleinu, we should never have this again. But
thank you for sharing. But how is the family doing? How is the family doing now today?
So the family, progressively, you see that they're processing, that they're unity, has been unbelievable. Thank God, in supporting them between the army, between the city, between different chesed committees, between the shuls, the Rabbi Frau Shul, Eish Kodesh, a huge amount of support.
I must say, my feelings from hearing Dovid speak, he was very strong, very focused. Am I right?
Strong. Very strong. When my friend and I, when we came to pick him up meet him at the dialysis, I was very nervous what we were going to find. I mean, Kanai Nahara David is 83, 82, 83.
Right.
86. 86.
No, he's not 80. There was a mistake, Yoni. It's a mistake.
Really?
Yeah, it's a mistake.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, when we found him, he was much stronger than I anticipated. And since then, I've been watching him. Was watching him very carefully. Been spending many hours with him. I talked with him at length on the way back from the Levi. We sat together in the bus and talked. Strong. I don't know where he's getting the strength from. Was actually kind of blown away.
Moshe, I know it's right. I know it's Thursday, but Moshe, I think you should, if you can, to write something, even if it's short. I can tell you in our shul alone, 12 soldiers that were with him and are beside themselves. And I think that if you would write something about this, it would give them such chizuk. Even something short. Doesn't have to be a whole Megillah. Just chizuk.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Okay,
we shall have Psudas Toivus, a gracious Moshe for sharing. And Mashiach should come, and we should have Tchias HaMesim, and the Kaddish Moshe Shmuel ben Dovid. Should be back with all the soldiers that fell. and we should be zeicher to the Gula Shlema. We'll see everyone with Shem next Monday. Have a great Shabbos. Only Simchas. Take care.
Amen.
Have a Thursday.
Amen. Bye-bye.